Hello, everybody, and welcome to Thriving Thursdays. I'm Carla, founder and coach at Vida Canvas, a life and career coaching company. I'm a former consulting leader in the corporate space turned RV nomad. And as a coach, my goal is to help others live their someday now and love Mondays. On Thriving Thursdays, we talk about tips and strategies for better living and for career empowerment. And today you might notice that I have a little bit of a different background than I've had the last couple of weeks. I'm not inside my camper. You can see it a little bit behind me. And I'm outside because frankly, there's just better cell phone signal outside. And I have to share with you all that last night was a really rough night when it comes to RV living. I think that other RVers will commiserate with us. The lifestyle of being on the road can be really magical and it can be full of really cool experiences, but it's not always romantic. It is romantic, but not always. My husband and I ended up spending several hours last night trying to find a place where we could sleep for the night and stay for a few days that not only was safe, but that also had cell phone signal, which is so critical to sustain our lifestyle. And so when there's so much at stake, like our jobs, our ability to connect with clients, feeling fear of not being able to find a place to sleep, a place that has good cell phone signal, is a fear that I experience constantly. And so you might be thinking, like, why do you put yourself through this? Why don't you just stay in one place that's stable, where you have consistent signal? And we've done that. Trust me. We started living in the city. That's where we were. We were in Dallas for many years, and honestly, just the sense of freedom that we have on the road, the nature around us, beautiful views, there's just nothing like it. And so as we chase this life full of experiences, experiences over things, and we chase these beautiful views, I've had to become really uncomfortably comfortable with a feeling that I know we all have felt at one point or another, and that is the feeling of fear. And that's what I wanna talk about today, how my relationship with fear has evolved as I've become and embraced this life of a full-time RV nomad. So ultimately, fear is just a passenger on the ride and not sitting in the driver's seat, and really taking over my life and my decisions. So first, let's explore and talk about, a little bit about what fearlessness means, to be fearless. I remember when I became, decided that I was going to do this and get on the road. And as I was sharing that with my colleagues at work and my friends, some people were like, "You're crazy. I would never do that." And other people were like, "That is so cool. You're so fearless." And as someone that is, can sometimes be a little bit indecisive, as I sometimes am, this label of being fearless was just it just felt so good, It made me feel really bold, it made me feel strong, it made me feel decisive. And I loved having that label. But the reality, it didn't feel real. It didn't feel that it was true. It was a false front because in reality, I actually felt a lot of fears. I had a lot of questions in my head. I had a lot of what ifs. For example, some of my what ifs were, what if I can't learn to drive this thing? What if I can't learn to pull this, this camper behind us and we get into an accident? That's our home, right? That's a big fear. Another one was, what if I get fired from my job, for being on the road, for not being in one place, for living in a city that is accessible to an office? Or what if Noah and I can't stand each other? Noah, my husband, we can't stand each other in 84 square feet and we start fighting. Or, sometimes I had some ridiculous fears like, what if we go hungry because our fridge is so small that we can't fit enough groceries for the week? So, I mean, the list goes on and on. I had fears of all sorts, and I still have fears today. I fear them all the time. I feel them all the time. This morning, the latest fear that I had was having a bear come up on us. We are in grizzly land, and it's a legitimate fear that there would be a bear that would creep up on us while I'm walking the dogs in the morning. So, the reality is that fear is real. And while most of you watching, or maybe you're watching later, may not live in an RV necessarily, we all are always feeling all kinds of fears, right? Maybe you're fearing that you're not good enough or smart enough to go after a certain experience. Maybe you're fearful of what other people will say. Maybe you have legitimate fears about your safety, right? Like right now, our world is creating a lot of circumstances that are creating a lot of very legitimate fears from an economic perspective, environmentally. And there's a bee. Um, good thing I'm not super afraid of bees. But the reality is that, if we do have fears, and having those fears is part of being human. And there would be something actually fundamentally wrong with us if we didn't feel fear sometimes. So the key here, the real question is, how do we live with fear? B. How do we live with fear so it doesn't overpower you, so it doesn't cripple you and stop you from going after your dreams? And what I've learned living this life on the road is that to be fearless is not about eliminating fear. Oh my goodness, this okay. It's not about eliminating fear, but rather it's learning how to leverage fear. So let's talk about what leveraging fear means. First of all, leveraging fear is about redefining your relationship with fear. And in order to do that, I recommend two things. First is respect the fear, and second is explore the fear. What do I mean by respecting fear? Don't be afraid to be afraid. The role of fear oftentimes is to protect us. It's to warn us from situations that can be dangerous. Being afraid of encountering a bear in the wilderness, like I often am in, it doesn't mean that I stay in my camper and do nothing and just stay inside all day, but it does mean that I'm on higher alert. It means that I am careful as I'm rounding corners in the woods to make sure that there's not a bear around the corner. It means that I carry bear spray, right? And I'm glad that I feel the fear. I'm glad that I'm afraid because it helps prevent me from making dumb mistakes, right? And being really careless. So when you think about fear and what you might think, can be something bad and have an aversion to, see the goodness that fear can provide you oftentimes in keeping you safe. um, so that's one, right? Respect the fear, learn to respect, and don't be afraid of being afraid. The second part of redefining your relationship with fear is exploring the fear. Be curious about it, right? Don't just focus on the what that is making you afraid, but focus on the why. Why is that making you afraid? When I think back to the experiences that I was, or not the experiences, the questions that I was having when we were about to hit the road, all those what ifs, it ultimately came down to lack of experience. I was worrying about a future that I did not yet know, and I was worrying about how I would be in that future. I didn't know me in that future that was coming. So you can be fearful of, and question and think about, like, why am I afraid of the future, right? For me, it was lack of experience. Analyzing and exploring your fear can also relate to the past, right? A past experience that maybe has conditioned us to think that because something has happened a certain way before, that it's going to happen again. And that is an assumption, right? So be curious, right? Don't just take your fears at face value, but understand and explore the why behind your fears, which can oftentimes help us appreciate where the fears are coming from, knowing that fear can protect us, and also help us realize that sometimes a fear may just be silly, right? And not to belittle, fear is something that is important to pay attention, but sometimes there's a fear that you just don't need to have. And sometimes there's a fear that maybe makes sense for you to have, but there's actually something that you can do about it. And that leads me to the next point. When it comes to leveraging fear, right? Reframe your relationship with fear, but then also prepare and take action, right? Oftentimes, our fear comes from a lack of confidence. That is really the antidote of fear. And in order to build a confidence, you need to prepare and you need to take action. So let's talk about preparing first. And I'll share with you that when my husband and I were getting ready to move into our casita, into our little camper, one of my biggest fears was that there was no way that we were going to be able to downsize from 750 square feet which is not that big, but trust me, we had a lot of stuff. I had no idea how in the world were we going to be able to downsize enough to move into 84 square feet. That's more than 600 square feet that we needed to liberate and free up. And so as the countdown came, was getting closer and closer for us to move into our camper, I knew that I was feeling overwhelmed, and I was afraid that there was just no way we were gonna be able to do this. But working with my husband, he helped quite a bit to help us to prepare for that next big step. And the way that we did that was by creating a plan and by taking it really step by step, right? We didn't do it all at once and overnight. We really did it little by little. We used to have this for anybody that visited our apartment back then. You may remember that we had these big sheets of paper on the wall with all kinds of sticky notes with to-do lists and all the different furniture that we had that we were going to get rid of, and we would take a sticky note off whenever that piece of furniture was sold or given away. It felt so good. And really that just helped us so much. And the reality is that when we did move into our camper, we still had too much stuff, but we had gone through all this preparation that allowed us to make those tough decisions in the moment when we actually were there was no choice. We had to move into this camper. We had prepared so much that we were in much better shape to make those tough decisions to get rid of stuff that actually we really wanted to keep. So preparing is really important, right? A way to manage fear is really thinking ahead. It's preparing, it's giving yourself enough time to to think about what steps you can put into place that will help build your confidence. So when you actually do face that fear and there's no turning back, you have all this experience and skills and knowledge behind you to help you in that moment and to support you. So preparation is really important. And finally, sometimes you just need to go for it and you just need to take the action despite the fear. One of the biggest fears, and this was a really legitimate fear, I mean, all of it was, but this one in particular was a big one. When we took on this lifestyle, I actually hadn't yet figured out how in the world I was going to work remotely. For my company, I still had a job that required me to be going to the office constantly. I needed to be on call for client meetings, and I really didn't know how I was going to tell people, that I was going to go and live in this camper. I mean, living in a camper is not something that many people in corporate do. It was something kind of weird, and I just didn't know how I was going to work remotely. My husband was already working remotely, so it was an easier transition for him, but I just had no idea. And I really thought about this, right? Like, I had a fear that I was gonna be fired because how dare you not be near an office where you can go and have a client meeting? Um, and I decided that I could either just keep waiting and wait until I figured it out, or just move into the camper anyway. I mean, all I wanted to do was hit the road and go off and explore the United States. And there's really not that much that I could have done to prepare for this particular one, but rather all I could do was just take the leap and go for it and move into the camper and figure it out. And what I found was that by taking that action of moving into the camper, the sense of urgency that I had on the other side, right, after I moved in, was so much greater than it had been before I made the leap that I had no choice. Like, I had to figure out how I was going to work remotely. And so I started to tell people. I got brave and started to tell my coworkers and told everybody, "Hey, I'm looking for remote opportunities. And this is why, I'm living this lifestyle." And what I found was that people were really open to helping me, and I ultimately did land a remote opportunity by really putting it out there and by just having the sense of urgency to learn how learn to figure it out because there was no other choice. And so the lesson here is that sometimes taking a risk despite the fear and putting yourself in the situation that you're fearing actually forces you to figure it out, right? It's a lot more comfortable to stay in the, "Oh, I have to wait until everything is perfect." Sometimes things are just not gonna be perfect. There's never gonna be a perfect moment, and you just have to go for it. And ultimately, by doing it, you will build the confidence to figure it out, um, and you will figure it out. So, in sum, while fear tends to have a negative connotation, right? We want to be this fearless, which we think means lack of fear. There's many ways that you can make fear be a good thing and serve you. By redefining your relationship with fear, you can realize the ways in which fear actually serves you, actually protects you from danger. You know, it can keep you safe, and you can also learn how fear maybe doesn't serve you. Right, by exploring, by asking why. Why do I have this fear? You may realize that this fear doesn't actually serve you, and you can move on and either do something about it or just stop feeling that fear that is stopping you in your tracks. By also preparing for the experience that you're fearing, like in our case, becoming really organized in our downsizing, you can actually build confidence in knowing that you're as ready as you can be to face the fear, and you will be fine. And you might end up building a new skill set that you didn't even think about. Like, I would like to say that I'm a little bit more organized now than I was before we downsized, right? I really had to learn how to be organized and really minimalist to live this lifestyle. And then by taking action, you not only prevent the fear from overpowering you, but you may actually learn that you're a lot more resilient, and a lot more resourceful than you're giving yourself credit for. When faced with a situation that's causing you fear, you may learn that there's actually nothing to be fearful about to begin with. So, I hope that by sharing my experiences with you and the wisdom that I've gained throughout this journey of being a full time RV nomad, I've inspired you to thrive more, to do more, and to go for what you want. I'd love to hear your thoughts either through the comments on this live broadcast. You can contact me on my Vida Canvas business page, or you can email me at carla@vidacanvas.com. Happy Thriving Thursdays to you all. I can't wait to see you next week. Thanks so much for joining. Bye.